All right, so the stage is now finally set. We're down to the last two candidates, Rishi Sunak versus Liz Truss. This is, of course, going to be the contest that we are looking for to elect the next Prime Minister in Britain. And this, of course, is where things get very interesting from here on, because so far it was the members of Parliament who had been voting to try and elect their next leadership. But now it'll be the larger Tory party members. There are an estimated almost about 160,000 of them who will be voting to elect the next Prime Minister of Britain. And it remains to be seen as to how each of these candidates will be able to convince their respective party members to, in fact, vote for them. Remember, Rishi Sunak has, in fact, been leading through all of these elections that had been happening in these polls that had been happening, where predominantly it was only the 350 party members, the members of Parliament, had in fact been voting for. And now Rishi Sunak faces off with Liz Truss, who managed to pip Penny Mordaunt in virtually the last round to emerge as the second candidate who is in the race to be the next Prime Minister of Britain. And Boris Johnson, of course, while speaking in the Parliament for the very last time as the Prime Minister, of course, left us with that very interesting line, "Hasta la vista, baby," the line from the Terminator. And a lot, of course, hangs in the balance, because remember, Britain at this point of time, after the COVID-19 pandemic, is going through a pretty bad patch economically. Inflation is a big issue. The way the taxes will, of course, be imposed, that's going to be one of the key issues on the basis of which people will, of course, vote. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have got completely different opinions on how the government should be taxing the people in Britain. And also the war in Ukraine is going to be a crucial aspect of how Britain will, of course, be looking at. And a change in leadership. Will there be a change in Britain's policy towards the war in Ukraine? These are, of course, some of the questions for which there are no immediate answers. But the race to 10 Downing Street is heating up. We're virtually in the last lap. But this is going to be a month-long lap. There will be at least 2 televised debates in which Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss will try and convince the party members of the Tory party to try and vote for them. There are an estimated 160,000 of these Tory party members who will, of course, be voting. And it remains to be seen as to which way this will, of course, go. But remember, the opinion polls do not favour Rishi Sunak to, in fact, come up on top in the elections in which the party members vote. And to give us more insights in terms of how this election will, of course, play out, we are joined in by our correspondent Olly Barratt, is now, in fact, joining us from London. So, Olly, we are down to the last stage. This is the final bit of the polls that are still to be conducted. We are given to understand that about 160,000 Tory party members will now be voting to elect their next Prime Minister. So tell us, what are Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss doing to convince the party members to elect them?
That's right. Actually, the party members, what they're voting for is to elect their party leader. Now, that person does also become the UK Prime Minister, because they will be the leader of a party that commands a majority in the House of Commons. But Conservative Party members, to be clear, are voting for who they want to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. That means that ballots are going to be sent out to, as you say, around 150 or 160,000 Conservative Party members. They will then have that chance to vote for who they want to be their next leader. That ballot will be open until September the 2nd, and then we will have the result announced of who's the next leader of the Conservative Party on September the 5th, and then we expect that person to take over in Downing Street as Prime Minister on September the 6th. And in that intervening period, what is happening is a series of hustings and televised debates. There'll be lots of interviews on the radio, on the television as well, so that Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak can both make their case directly to the party members. Of course, through the process that we've seen so far, it's been Conservative MPs that have been voting, just Conservative MPs, but now Absolutely. It is the wider party membership. So in a sense, the audience has slightly changed over the last 24 hours or so, and now Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss are trying to make their case directly to the membership, to the grassroots.
Absolutely, indeed. And also, just before we let you go, Olly, weigh in terms of what can we expect will happen with Boris Johnson. He will no longer be the Prime Minister of Britain in about a month's time. The last he addressed the British Parliament, he ended with words, "Hasta la vista, baby." He did not say, "I will be back," which is the other very famous line of the Terminator. What happens to his political future from here on?
It's very difficult to predict. He did drop several hints in that final Prime Minister's questions, as you say, that he perhaps is not done. And there's lots of speculation that he could, for example, try and hang around and pick up the pieces if whoever is the next leader of the Conservative Party doesn't have a very good time of it, that perhaps he'll wait in the wings and try and launch another leadership campaign at some point in the future. He will be caretaker Prime Minister effectively through till September the 6th, and then he becomes a backbench MP. That is what Downing Street says he plans to do next. What we don't know, of course, is whether he plans to fight the next general election, whenever that may be. His former aide, Dominic Cummings, has put out a theory of his. He believes that Boris Johnson wants Liz Truss to be the next Prime Minister because he feels that she won't do a very good job, will then at some point be removed from that position, and then he'll be waiting in the wings to take over.
Right.
That is something that will be denied by Downing Street, it'll be denied by Boris Johnson, but certainly he has been dropping some hints that his political career, in his view, may not be over. But there's also lots of speculation that actually in the coming months he could make a slide over back into the media, back into journalism in some way. So we will very much have to keep an eye on Boris Johnson and see what happens in the coming months.
Absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Olly Barratt, for joining us and getting us all those insights from London. It does promise to be a pretty interesting next few weeks ahead in terms of what happens in British politics. And of course, Boris Johnson should not be written out. He'll be sitting as a backbencher, but will he, of course, try and make a comeback? That's something that we'll have to look out for over the course of the next few months. But now the task on hand, the immediate one, is what happens with these two, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, the two of them who will now be trying to convince the Tory party members to elect them in the election. Now, over the course of the next 6 weeks, about 200,000 members of the Conservative Party will assess both Truss and Sunak, not for their charisma, but rather for their policies. What do they stand for? Now, both Sunak and Truss have set out some of their policies already, and here's what we know so far. The big issue is, of course, that of taxation and spending. Now, Liz Truss has said that she will reverse the national insurance rate rise that is designed to fund health and social care. She also wants to continue the Johnsonian levelling up agenda, but based around low taxes and low regulation zones. She's also told one of the local British media there that she would treat borrowing built up during the pandemic like a war debt to be written off over a long period. Now, Sunak, on the other hand, has promised a return to traditional conservative economic values. He differs on Truss on tax cuts, saying that acting now would stoke inflation and would also increase borrowing. He's also pledged to cut tax once inflation is under control. He's also expressed a desire to bring about radical reforms to the way businesses are taxed. Now, on the issue of climate change, Sunak has it's been said that she would set out a new legal target for the United Kingdom to be energy independent by as early as 2045 at the latest. He was also committed to maintaining government's legally binding goal of reaching net zero emissions by 2050, and has also assured the Tories that green wing is something that will go on to protect the environment. Truss, meanwhile, is committed to maintaining the government's legal goal of reaching zero emissions by 2050 and has said that she will suspend green energy levies. Now, on the issue of Brexit, Liz Truss has said that she can be trusted despite having voted to remain in the European Union back in 2016. Now, she's responsible for introducing the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which could override parts of the post-Brexit deal between the United Kingdom and the EU. Rishi Sunak, meanwhile, has criticised the manner in which the Northern Ireland Protocol works, saying that it is operating and is posing enormous challenges to the stability of the situation in the nation. He's also committed to reforming all EU laws and bureaucracy that are still in place by the time of the next general election. He said that he'd also want to scrap regulation on financial services that he says have been inherited from the EU to trigger growth in the sector that is similar to that was seen in the 1980s. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.